I'll buy you a beer later, dude. Cold open for this one featured the Ojamajo cleaning the poop off the statue of the founder of their school. I mean, yeah, they seem to have volunteered for this, but couldn't they have given these kids a slightly more sanitary job? Well, regardless, this was more meant to set up the premise of this episode, which was as a possible flashback to explain the origins of their school. I say possible because it does at least feel a little inconsistent with stuff that we've established, but more on that later. For now, we just jump right back to 1853 Japan. And I'm guessing specifically in July, as that was when Commodore Matthew Perry of the US Navy had arrived in Edo with his Kurofune and was trying to strong-guard the Japanese into opening up trade with them. Understandably, these were very stressful times for the country, though not so much for these incarnations of the Ojamajo to worry about. Yeah, at first I thought these were going to be like the ancestors of the current quartet, but then they kind of threw a wrench into that, as Hana was also here even though she shouldn't be born yet, and seemingly left behind by an incarnation of the Witch Queen. However, as we see later, this is apparently a different baby than the one from the Blue Rose Garden, even though she looked, sounded, and even had the same name as her. So yeah, I think the best way to look at this is as an Elseworld story, like what would it be like if the Ojamajo were around during the final years of the shogunate. It's a lot better than whatever Marvel's putting out these days. This was also supposed to be the story of their school's founder named Gonoshin Horiuchi, who ended up becoming Hana's temporary guardian. It worked out for him, as he was like a lot of other out-of-work ronin around this time, and had nothing really else to do other than watch a kid. Oh, come on, Jonochi. We all know you can make a better face than that. It was certainly better than working for the daimyo, who at the time were indeed falling apart over the arrival of Perry. Yeah, I think the Tokugawa shogun from around this time are often portrayed as incompetent leaders, as really in hindsight, Japan should have given up on trying to sustain their isolationism a lot sooner, as that was only ever going to lead to their country's downfall. Thus, who would have been better to play the role of the incompetent yet manipulative politician than this old fart? Well, I already like this retelling of Snow White a lot more than Disney's upcoming disaster in the works. Meanwhile, the kids of the town, who all of course look like the Ojamajo and their classmates, decide to help Horiuchi take care of Hana. Though some also want to know why a single dude was taking care of someone else's kid. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's still called being abandoned. Still, this did lead to the most interesting part of this episode, when they realized that the boys and girls had different skill sets, mostly based around their genders, even though skills like reading and math should be taught to everyone, especially with the inevitable changes that would come about from Japan ending its isolationism. Horiuchi had recognized this and figured that it would be a good thing to create a centralized learning system. Honestly, this was really good stuff, as I'd imagine a lot of real-life school and education systems got started because of divergent educations like this. Remember when flat earthers were just kind of ignorant and not insane douchebags? However, his landlord wasn't all for it, and oh sweet Jesus.
Oh my god! What's wrong with your face?
Yeah, I guess this character was supposed to be played by Majorika, but y'all do remember that she had a different face before she turned into a frog, right? Or is this actually what she's going to age into as a witch? Either way, this is going to be stuck in my nightmares for the next few weeks. Anyway, the landlady was considering evicting Horiuchi over the noise complaints that Hana was causing, on top of the fact that he was overcrowding his home with a bunch of kids. However, she then out of nowhere let them use an old storehouse for their classes after she saw Hana use magic, suggesting she was doing it for her. Now again, these characters are going to have different origins than our mainline characters, but it is very convenient how similar they end up becoming.
Coincidence? I think not!
Anyway, while they were cleaning what would eventually become the grounds for their future school, Oyaji Daimyo was scheming his next course of action, which of course would include removing anything or anyone who would get in his way. Bruh, it's mindsets like that that are going to result in Godzilla or our Gosmodome paying you a little visit. But yeah, much like his modern day self, he tried to, and did succeed in taking Hana, as one, Horuchi is way too trusting, and two, the Ojamajo didn't actually exist in this timeline. Granted, that latter issue would be dealt with rather quickly and kind of easily.
Holy crap, someone actually did pull off the UFO ending.
Actually, they've been summoned by the Witch Queen, or rather Kanon, or rather Kuan Yin if you're going by the original Chinese. Yeah, basically, in this story, the queen was the goddess of mercy in Buddhism, and Hana was one of her young apostles.
Slight change up in being heretical witches, but not that big, right?
Though with that, they got their taps and outright said that they were still witches, which I'm pretty sure aren't a part of Buddhism, last I checked at least. But I guess for an Elseworld story, they couldn't change too much up. Though they did change up the fact that they didn't have to hide their identities, and just went straight into confronting Horuchi to learn what had happened to Hana. With that, we got the usual Yashi battle, or would this count as the original? Then, to be fair, it wasn't a bad fight, as the daimyo's powers were now ninjutsu rather than the usual magecraft, resulting in a fire-breathing toad, which is pretty awesome. However, after Hana managed to get herself free, the Ojamajo used the magical stage, which, again, wasn't this supposed to be like their first time doing this? And they used some cold weather to turn Oyashi into his toad form. I don't know. With that, they returned Hana to the goddess, and they woke up the next morning believing that it was all just a dream.
I wouldn't say that.
The kids had to sadly accept the fact that the baby that they had got to know over likely just a few days was gone, but hey, they could now look forward to going to school as Horuchi decided to establish the grounds for his future centralized learning system. And the episode ended with us returning to the present and then playing it off like this is all totally canon with the rest of the show. Again, I think it mostly works as just an Elseworlds.
Because when viewed from at least that standpoint, this makes it a pretty okay-ish episode.
Like, personally, I really do like the Edo period, especially during the times of Reformation, when things were rapidly changing due to the arrival of the Kurofune, which this episode did kind of highlight.
That said, as an Elseworld story, it could have used a few more change-ups to give it a bit more of its own unique identity.
Part of what makes Japan's Edo period so fascinating for me was learning about how the old traditions got replaced with the new. In the case of this episode, they were showing how Ronin, around this time, were converting to other jobs like educators when they recognized the changing times and their own obsolescence. Horuchi was a rather amiable case, as he seemed to recognize that the next generations deserved better upbringings than him, which is a nice and premature message. In fact, I kind of wish he had gotten a little more focus, rather than us just switching back to our usual programming of the Ojamajo saving Hana from Oyashi, but now in feudal Japan. Like, for an Elseworld story, it did feel a little too close to the regular stuff, especially when you consider they were getting their magic from a major deity in Buddhism, and yet dressing up like Western portrayals of spellcasters. As a result, it did feel a little too samey when they could have changed things up a little more. Like, just some minor changes probably wouldn't have affected the usual stock animations too much, or hell, maybe just not use stuff like the magical stage, which these versions of the Ojamajo only just learned about anyway. Still, it wasn't too bad, and overall, while I certainly would have appreciated a little more exploration of the setting, mostly through the eyes of the character from the cold opening, this was just a fine enough little what-if scenario of the Ojamajo in the Edo period. Hey, if anything, at least they didn't run into some random rappers out of nowhere.
As always, I hope everyone is having a nice week, as we're already over halfway into the month, Jesus.
Yeah, maybe it's just this old man talking, but it really feels like it was only 2023 yesterday, and yet this year feels like it's going on fast forward. With that in mind, we probably should get to work on some of those other videos, like the Ultimate Precure overview.
Look forward to it. Until then, though, for now, my friends, and, yeah, just keep at it, girl. You'll get it eventually. Or not.